The lore of the Great Ones begins with a fundamental, cosmic tragedy. Every Great One loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. This is the first law of the Eldritch, a biological curse that tethers these multidimensional titans to the fragile world of humanity. While humans view the Great Ones as omnipotent gods, the lore of the barren divinity reveals that they are a species in the midst of an evolutionary crisis. They exist on planes of thought and higher dimensions that the human mind perceives as the nightmare or the dream, but they are physically incapable of producing viable offspring within those realms. This creates a predatory yearning. The purpose of the Great Ones is not to destroy humanity, but to harvest it, to find a biological womb or a psychic cradle capable of hosting the next generation of their kind. The Great One's purpose is rooted in symbiotic necessity. Because they are formless or transcendental, they lack the density of matter required for birth. They look upon the old blood of humanity as a fertile soil. The lore of the celestial seed suggests that the Great Ones plant their influence within human civilizations, such as the Thumerians or the Yharnamites, to cultivate a species that can eventually produce a child of blood. This makes the entirety of human history a cosmic farm. The Great Ones do not care for human morality, architecture, or suffering. They only care for the insight and the blood quality of the crop. When a civilization reaches a critical mass of blood saturation, the Great Ones descend to reap the potential surrogates, leading to the fall of cities like Yharnam. The communication of the deep is the primary tool for this purpose. The Great Ones do not speak, they resonate. The lore of the Eldritch Whispers explains that the insight humans gain is actually the spores of a Great One's consciousness taking root in the brain. This is the invasive purpose. By granting eyes on the inside, the Great Ones are upgrading the human hardware to make it compatible with their own frequency. This is why Master Willem and Lawrence felt driven to seek the blood. They were being pulled by a biological magnetism. The Great Ones beckon because they are empty, and they seek to fill that emptiness with the vigor of a mortal race. This creates a parasitic cycle of ascension, where the rise of human knowledge is merely a ripening for the Great One's harvest. The purpose is further complicated by the hierarchy of the astral. Not all Great Ones seek the same thing. The lore of the formless Eden suggests a Great One that exists only in voice and blood, seeking to impregnate human women, like Ariana, to create a child of sound. Meanwhile, the Moon Presence seeks to monitor the other Great Ones, using the hunter's dream as a tool to slay rival infants. This reveals a cosmic ecology. The purpose of the Great Ones is a competitive evolution. They are fighting over the surrogate resources of Earth. Humanity is the chessboard, and the blood is the currency. The fall of humanity is a side effect of this high-level competition. When two gods fight over a cradle, the nursery, the city, is inevitably burned to the ground. Furthermore, the lore of the sympathetic nature of the Great Ones, as mentioned in the description of the Greatest Chalice, shows that they are answerers of prayers. This is the trap of compassion. When humans call out to the cosmos in their suffering, the Great Ones respond. But because their reality is so vastly different, their help manifests as horror. They provide the blood to cure disease, but that blood carries the scourge. This is the tragedy of the translation. The Great One's purpose is to help humanity ascend to their level, but the human frame is too brittle. The rise toward the stars results in the bursting of the human form. The Great Ones are like whales trying to save a drowning ant. Their very touch is a cataclysm. The act concludes with the realization that the Great Ones are gilded prisoners of their own perfection. They have reached the peak of evolution, but they have lost the ability to begin. Their purpose is a quest for the start. They look at the messy, violent, procreative life of humans with a sense of divine envy. The hunter's dream is the laboratory where this envy is processed. The fall of the old gods is the only way for the new god, the hunter, to be born. Part 1 establishes the Great Ones not as evils to be conquered, but as lonely forces of nature seeking a connection that their own divinity has denied them. The The scourge is their love made physical, and the nightmare is their home made visible. The legacy of the Great One's purpose in this first chapter is the redefinition of the harvest. We are not the masters of our world. We are the incubators. The rise of our civilization is the expansion of the womb. As we look up at the pale blood moon, we are not looking at a celestial body. We are looking at an expectant parent waiting for the birth that will inevitably kill the mother. The fall is not an end. It is a delivery. The second chapter in the 17-part chronicle of the Great One's purpose delves into the most enigmatic and pervasive entity in the Yharnam mythos, Eden. While other Great Ones, such as the Moon Presence or Amygdala, possess physical, albeit horrific, manifestations, Eden is defined by his formlessness. The lore of Eden is the lore of the omnipresent essence. He exists only as a voice and as the medium of the blood itself. This reveals a terrifying layer of the Great One's purpose. The goal is not always to be seen or worshipped, but to infiltrate the biological infrastructure. Eden's purpose is the sublimation of identity. By existing within the blood that every Yharnamite craves and consumes, Eden has achieved a level of ubiquity that no other Great One can match. He does not need to descend from the sky. He is already flowing through the veins of every living creature in the city. The lore of the Great One of Sound explains that Eden's influence is transmitted through vibration and resonance. This is why the Eden Chapel is a place of sanctuary. It is a sonic dead zone or a harmonic anchor where his influence is stabilized. The purpose of Eden is to find a vessel for the formless. Because he lacks a body, his primary drive is to co-opt the reproductive systems of humans to create a physical scion. This is the parasitism of the pulse. Throughout the night, the hunter witnesses the secret impregnation of women like Ariana, woman of the pleasurable vices. Eden does not use a physical act. He uses the blood medium to rewrite the genetic code of the unborn. The rise of the child of Eden is the fall of the human mother's autonomy. The purpose is to turn the human womb into a universal speaker that can finally give voice to the formless God. The relationship between Eden and the Quicksilver bullets provides a mechanical insight into this cosmic purpose. Quicksilver is fused with the user's own blood, and the Eden Writhe and formless Eden runes reward the hunter for visceral attacks with more bullets. The lore of the liquid catalyst suggests that Eden thrives in the moment of rupture. When blood is spilled in a visceral manner, the resonance of Eden is at its peak. He is the god of the hemorrhage. His purpose is to encourage the circulation and spilling of blood, because that is the only way his voice can be heard by the physical world. This makes the hunt itself a hymn to Eden. Every gunshot and every arterial spray is a note in a cosmic symphony that the Formless One is conducting. The hunter is not just a killer. They are a musician of the macabre, performing the work of Eden with every pull of the trigger. The lore of the Eden Chapel Dweller offers a rare glimpse into the passive purpose of this Great One. The Dweller is a simpleton, yet he is the only one who provides a true sanctuary in the nightmare. This suggests that Eden's purpose is not purely destructive. There is a cold compassion in the formlessness. By gathering survivors in the chapel, Eden is preserving the herd. He is not saving them out of love, but out of stockpile management. He needs living blood to maintain his vocal cord in the waking world. This is the economy of the echo. The Great One protects the vessels so that the essence has a place to reside. The rise of the sanctuary is the preservation of the raw material. The fall occurs only when the blood becomes too stagnant to vibrate, leading to the beastly scourge which Eden views as sonic static. Furthermore, the connection between Eden and the Themerian Queen reveals the ancient precedent of his purpose. Queen Yharnam was the first to be blessed or cursed with the child of blood. The blood moon and the red moon are the visual echoes of Eden's menstrual cycle on a cosmic scale. The lore of the blood-stained wedding suggests that the Themerians were the first instruments that Eden tried to play. The fall of their civilization was the result of a shattered harmony. The child was too loud for the mother to survive. This reinforces the tragedy of the Great One's purpose. They seek a surrogate, but their very frequency is lethal to the material plane. Eden is a god of love whose kiss is a brain hemorrhage. He wants to be with us, but his presence is erasure. The carol runes associated with Eden are the sheet music of the stars. When the hunter inscribes these runes into their mind, they are tuning themselves to Eden's key. This provides the hunter with the ability to carry more quicksilver, effectively turning the protagonist into a resonance chamber. The purpose of the Great One is to standardize the hunter. By the midpoint of the night, the hunter's blood is no longer human. It is Eden conductive. This is the biological colonization of the protagonist. The rise of the hunter's power is the replacement of their human pulse with the oscillation of the void. They are becoming a living tuning fork for a god who has no mouth and must scream through the wounds of the world. The act concludes with the birth of the infant Great One from Ariana in the sewers beneath the chapel. The child is a small crying thing that is barely there. This is the fragility of the formless purpose. Despite all the blood and all the resonance, the result is a stutter. Eden's purpose is an infinite attempt at expression. He will continue to sow his voice in the blood of Yharnam, in the echoes of the hunter, and in the cries of the newborns until a vessel is found that does not break under the weight of the sound. The fall of Ariana is a minor chord in a symphony that has been playing since the birth of the stars. The legacy of Eden's purpose in Part 2 is the invisibility of the master. We look for the boss in the fog, but the boss is the fog. We look for the killer in the alley, but the killer is the blood on our hands. The rise of our understanding reveals that we are not being watched by Eden. We are being used as a medium by him. As the hunter fires their last quicksilver bullet, they are not just killing a beast. They are broadcasting the will of the formless into the night. The fall of Yharnam is the silence that Eden is trying to fill. The third chapter in the 17-part examination of the Great One's purpose brings us to the zenith of the celestial hierarchy. The moon presence, also known by the secret name Flora. While Eden is the essence of the blood, the moon presence is the architect of the struggle. The lore of the moon presence is the lore of the strategic custodian. Unlike her peers, who often seem content to drift through the multidimensional sea or respond passively to human prayers, the moon presence is an active predator with a defined, operational goal. Her purpose is the sanitization of the nightmare. She is the manager of the hunter's dream, and her presence in the sky of Yharnam, the pale blood moon, is the eye of the storm that oversees the entire night of the hunt. Her purpose is a paradox. She is a great one who hunts other great ones, using humanity as her proximal blade. The lore of the pale blood ambition reveals that the moon presence seeks to prune the cosmic garden. As the first law of the Eldritch states, great ones yearn for surrogates, but the moon presence appears to have a monopolistic drive. Her purpose is to ensure that no other great one successfully births or sustains a child of blood on the terrestrial plane. This is the cosmic security protocol. By tethering a human hunter to the dream, she creates a sovereign assassin who is immune to the typical madness of the other gods. The rise of the hunter is the tooling of a weapon. The moon presence does not want the hunter to ascend for their own sake. She wants them to clear the field. When the hunter slays Murgo's wet nurse or the orphan of Kos, they are essentially evicting rival influences from the moon presence's territory. The fall of Yharnam is the acceptable collateral for her maintaining astral dominance. The relationship between the moon presence and Gehrman provides the most tragic insight into her managerial purpose. Gehrman is the host, but more accurately, he is the caged specimen. The lore suggests that the moon presence was beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, but the price of her help was the capture of a human soul to serve as the anchor for her dream simulation. This reveals her transactional nature. She provides immortality to the hunter, but in exchange, she harvests the results. This is the economy of the pale blood. The blood echoes that the hunter collects are not just numbers. They are data points and energy units that the moon presence uses to sustain the dream. She is refining human violence into celestial power. The rise of the dream stability is directly proportional to the drain of the waking world's vitality. The physical appearance of the moon presence, specifically her exposed ribcage and lack of skin, tells a story of relentless vulnerability. In the lore of the bleached god, the moon presence is depicted as a being that has given everything to the dream. She is a loom that is made of its own thread. Her purpose is to exert control through vulnerability. When she embraces the hunter in the honoring of the contract ending, she is not showing love. She is infesting the hunter with her pale blood scent. This is the surrogacy of the shadow. Since she cannot have a child of her own, she adopts the strongest hunters to serve as her limb in the physical world. The protagonist becomes the new Gehrman, a hand for a brain that exists in the pale blood sky. Her purpose is to extend her reach through the grip of a human hand. Furthermore, the gaze of the moon, her signature ability to reduce the hunter's health to a single point, is the ultimate expression of her dominance over vitality. She is the source of the blood's power in the dream, and she can withdraw it at will. This reveals the authority of the pale blood. Her purpose is to be the final arbiter. She allows the vile bloods, the church, and the Mensi scholars to play with blood. But when the pale blood moon descends, she resets the board. The rise of the blood moon is the harvest moon. She is here to collect the dregs. This is the cycle of the great harvest. Every few centuries, when humanity gets too close to the truth, the moon presence descends to prune the tree of knowledge back to its stump. The 3/3 of umbilical cord are the only things that can counteract her purpose. The lore of the resistance to the pale blood suggests that these cords are the only truths she did not create. By consuming them, the hunter becomes opaque to her gaze. They are no longer a tool she can read or reset. This leads to the failure of the manager. When the moon presence tries to absorb the hunter and fails, her purpose shifts from management to self-preservation. She must destroy the anomaly she created. This is the irony of the Great One's purpose. She sought a perfect hunter to kill her rivals, but she succeeded so well that the hunter has become her replacement. The fall of the moon presence is the redundancy of the god. The dream no longer needs her because it has found a more efficient battery in the protagonist. The act concludes with the fires of the workshop. As the moon presence is defeated, the pale blood sky breaks. This signifies the termination of the contract. Her purpose, to maintain a stable loop of slaughter, is shattered. The lore of Part 3 establishes the moon presence as the cosmic bureaucrat of blood. She was the one who kept the books of the nightmare. She was the director of the play. The rise of the hunter into an infant great one is the final audit that found her wanting. As she dissipates into pale blood haze, the hunter realizes that her purpose was never evil, just coldly functional. She wanted a clean universe, and in the hunter, she finally found the broom that was strong enough to sweep her away too. The legacy of the moon presence's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the loop. We realized that we weren't fighting for freedom. We were cleaning the office for a god who didn't want to do the work herself. The rise of our power was just a promotion in a company that liquidates its staff at the end of every fiscal night. As the hunter looks up at the now empty sky, they understand that the moon was never guiding them. It was just watching to see if they were profitable enough to keep. The fall is the realization that the pale blood is the ink with which our slavery was written. The fourth chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose shifts our focus from the manager in the sky to the sentinels on the walls, the amygdala. These multi-limbed, almond-headed titans are perhaps the most visually representative of the eldritch incursion into Yharnam. While the moon presence is a strategic overseer, the amygdalae serve the purpose of the omnipresent observers. They are the watchers of the threshold, existing in the interstitial spaces between the waking world and the nightmare. The lore of the amygdala is the lore of the surveillance of the soul. Their purpose is to act as the gargoyles of reality, clinging to the architecture of human ambition, specifically the cathedral ward and the nightmare frontier, to monitor the psychic leakage of the human race. They do not hide. They simply exist on a frequency that the uninsightful cannot perceive. The lore of the false cathedral reveals that the amygdalae are the tax collectors of the cosmos. Their purpose is the extraction of the unworthy. This is evidenced by their behavior toward the hunter. If the protagonist possesses the tonsil stone or tries to access the DLC without the proper internal eyes, the amygdala reaching down from the cathedral wall will seize them in a crushing void. This is the culling of the curious. The amygdalae serve as filters. They allow those with high insight to pass into the deeper nightmares while consuming or crushing those who are merely blood-drunk. This creates a hierarchical purgatory. The amygdalae ensure that the nightmare is not flooded with low-level consciousness. They are the bouncers at the door of the gods, and their purpose is to maintain the purity of the transcendental space. The rise of the hunter's ability to see them is the fall of the hunter's protection. Once you see the amygdala truly sees you. The physical anatomy of the amygdala, specifically its almond-shaped head, referencing the amygdala in the human brain responsible for fear, tells a story of biological resonance. The lore of the fear engine suggests that these great ones feed on, or are attracted to, primal terror. Their purpose is to exacerbate the panic of a dying city. By perching on the chapels and churches where humans go to pray, they are harvesting the despair of the faithful. They are psychic parasites that thrive in the shadow of the cross. This reveals a dark truth about the healing church. The very buildings meant for salvation are actually feeding troughs for the amygdalae. The rise of the church's influence was the construction of a buffet for these entities. Their purpose is to wait and watch until the fear reaches a nutritional peak, at which point they pull the inhabitants into the nightmare frontier. The relationship between the amygdalae and the nightmare frontier provides insight into their territorial purpose. Unlike the moon presence, who creates a dream for a specific purpose, the amygdalae seem to inhabit the natural waste of the cosmos. The nightmare frontier is a graveyard of lost civilizations, littered with the tombstones of Themerians and Lauren citizens. The lore of the scavenger gods suggests that the amygdalae are the vultures of the astral plane. Their purpose is to reclaim the remains. When a city like Yharnam falls, the amygdalae drag the architectural and spiritual fragments into their frontier. This is why the nightmare frontier looks like a rotting version of the real world. They are the hoarders of history. They collect the echoes of failed ascensions to line the walls of their false cathedrals. The fall of Yharnam is the expansion of their museum of grief. Furthermore, the great amygdala, found as a boss in the frontier or the defiled chalice, represents the will to combat. While the lesser amygdalae on the walls are passive observers, the great versions are active combatants. This reveals a martial purpose. They serve as the final exam for the tomb prospector. To reach the queen or the deepest truths, the hunter must prove they can dismantle a god. The amygdala fights by ripping off its own arms to increase its reach, a lore-heavy sign of desperate divinity. They are willing to mutilate their own form to stop the intruder. This shows that their purpose is also protective. They are guarding the root of the nightmare from the moon-scented parasite. They are the antibodies of the cosmos, trying to kill the infection, the hunter, that has entered the bloodstream of the gods. The lore of the amygdalan arm, a weapon crafted from the limb of a small amygdala, is a testament to the residual sentience of their purpose. Even when severed and turned into a club, the arm wriggles with a life of its own. This implies that the amygdalae are fractal entities. Every piece of them carries the will to watch. By wielding the arm, the hunter is co-opting the sight of the sentinel. This creates a blasphemous symbiosis. The hunter is using the watcher's limb to blind the watcher. The purpose of the amygdala is thus subverted by the violence of the hunt. The rise of the hunter's weapon crafting is the sacrilege of the anatomy. The protagonist is dissecting the sentinels to see what they were looking at. The act concludes with the hunter standing over the defeated head of the great amygdala. The gaze has finally been closed. However, the lore of the infinite watch reminds us that there are thousands more clinging to the buildings of the higher planes. You cannot kill the purpose of the amygdala because observation is a constant of the universe. They are the cosmic CCTV. Their purpose is to ensure that nothing goes unseen. Even as the hunter ascends, the amygdalae are there, recording the birth of the new god. They are the biographers of the apocalypse. The fall of the individual hunter is a footnote in their great archive of the void. The legacy of the amygdala's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the witness. We realize that we were never alone. Even in our most private moments of blood-drunk rage, the sentinels were clinging to the roof, measuring our pulse with their many eyes. The rise of our power was just a show for an audience that doesn't clap, but only clutches. As the hunter wipes the blood from their visor, they look up and realize that the architecture is breathing. The cathedral is not a building, it is a body. And the gods are not up there, they are right here, holding the walls together with their ancient, spindly fingers. The fifth chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose descends into the cooling depths of the lunar lake to examine the most tragic and misunderstood guardian of the mythos, Ram, the vacuous spider. While the moon presence manages the hunt and the amygdalae watch the threshold, Ram serves the singular, monumental purpose of the metaphysical dam. She is the veil weaver, an ascended human-turned Great One whose primary function is to cloak the horrific truth of the cosmos from the collective consciousness of humanity. The lore of Ram is the lore of the mercy of the mirage. Her purpose is to prevent the blood moon from descending and to hide the amygdalae from the sight of the masses. She is the sanity of Yharnam, a bloated, silent sentinel who holds the world's fractured reality together by her mere presence. The lore of the vacuous state reveals that Ram's purpose required the sacrifice of the mind. To become the veil, Ram had to be emptied. Master Willem of Bergenworth, through his experiments with the internal eyes, succeeded in elevating Ram, but the result was a being that is vacuous, lacking in ego, speech, or independent will. This is the lobotomy of the divine. Her purpose is to act as a psychic heat sink. She absorbs the eldritch radiance of the Great Ones so that it does not incinerate the brains of the common citizenry. This creates a cordon of ignorance. As long as Ram dreams at the bottom of the lake, the nightmare remains underground. The rise of Ram was the creation of a false peace. She is the wall between the sheep and the wolves of the cosmos, and her purpose is to ensure that the sheep never see the teeth. The physical appearance of Ram, a massive, multi-eyed, grub-like entity, tells a story of arrested development. The lore of the immature Great One suggests that Ram is a halted evolution. She is not a natural Great One like Eden. She is an artificial one, built by human hands to serve a human purpose. Protection through stagnation. Her purpose is to freeze time. By masking the red moon, she prevents the Menses ritual from reaching its climax, effectively keeping the child of blood in a state of suspended animation. This makes Ram the antagonist of progress. To the scholars of Menses, she is a traitor or an obstacle to be overcome. To the common man, she is the unseen savior. The rise of the hunter's mission to kill her is the greatest misunderstanding of the game. The hunter is destroying the shield that protects the world from the sun. The relationship between Ram and the Bergenworth Academy provides insight into the ethics of the veil. Master Willem knew that evolution without courage leads to the scourge. His purpose for Ram was to buy time. He wanted humanity to evolve internally, insight, before they were exposed to the external reality, the nightmare. Ram is the guardian of the classroom. She ensures that the students don't see the void until they have grown their own eyes. However, this purpose is Sisyphean. You cannot hide the sun forever. The lore of the lake's reflection suggests that the lunar lake acts as a mirror that traps the light. Ram sits at the center of this mirror, holding the reflection in place. When the hunter enters the water and slays Ram, they are breaking the glass. This is the inauguration of the apocalypse. Furthermore, the spiderlings that Ram summons represent the protective instinct of the vacuum. These spiders have stone-like heads and are fiercely defensive. The lore suggests that they are the fragmented thoughts of Ram's lost humanity, manifesting as soldiers of the silence. Their purpose is to kill the questioner. They represent the violence of security. To keep the secret, Ram must kill the seeker. This reveals a dark side to her vacuous purpose. It is a tyranny of safety. She forces the world to remain blind for its own good, even if that blindness leads to the stagnation and decay of the soul. The fall of Ram is the liberation of the horror. When she dies, the red moon is born, the veil is torn, and the truth floods the world like a tsunami of blood. The lore of the Altar of Despair in the Upper Cathedral Ward provides a post-mortem look at Ram's purpose. Here, the hunter finds a petrified version of Ram being mourned by Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. This reveals a sympathetic kinship between the failure and the veil. Ebrietas is a left-behind Great One, and Ram is a constructed one. Their purpose is intertwined in the grief of the earth. The lore suggests that the Great Ones value Ram's veil because it keeps the insects, humans, from annoying the high gods. Ram's purpose was to be the cosmic noise-canceling machine. With her gone, the cries of humanity reach the ears of the stars, and the Great Ones are forced to look down. The act concludes with the red moon's descent over the lake. As Ram's body fades into white mist, the pale blood sky is revealed in its full, terrifying glory. The amygdalae become visible, the Menses ritual accelerates, and the hidden village of Yharnam is exposed. The lore of Part 5 establishes Ram as the tragic martyr of the illusion. She was the last line of defense for the human mind. The rise of the night of the blood moon is her ultimate failure. The hunter realizes that killing Ram was the final key that the moon presence needed to open the door to the end times. Ram was not evil, she was just quiet. And in a world of eldritch screams, quiet was the only mercy left. The legacy of Ram's purpose in this chapter is the burden of the truth. We realize that seeing is not winning. The insight we gained by killing the spider is the insight that will frenzy our soul. The rise of our visual perception is the fall of our safety. As the blood moon looms over the horizon, the hunter looks at their hands and realizes they have murdered the blindfold. They are now staring directly into the sun, and the sun is angry. Ram's vacuous purpose was the gift of a lie, and the hunter has chosen the cruelty of the fact. The 6th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose descends into the subbasement of the Grand Cathedral, to the hidden Altar of Despair. Here resides Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, a Great One whose existence defines the lore of the Left Behind. Unlike the Moon Presence or Eden, who occupy the vast reaches of the dream or the blood, Ebrietas is a physical, tethered entity. The lore of Ebrietas is the lore of the reluctant bridge. While most Great Ones ascended to the higher planes, Ebrietas remained within the labyrinth of the earth. Her purpose is a poignant and terrifying intersection of divine melancholy and human exploitation. She serves as the primal source for the healing church, the holy medium through which the old blood was channeled into Yharnam. Her purpose is the sanctification of the scourge. The lore of the abandoned daughter reveals that Ebrietas was found in the Thamirian tombs by the early scholars of the choir. This discovery provided the church with its foundation stone. Her purpose, from the perspective of the Great Ones, was perhaps to act as a steward of the deep. She is the daughter who did not ascend, possibly because she was incomplete, or because her purpose was to await the arrival of a species worthy of contact. However, the choir subverted this purpose, turning her into a biological wellspring. She is a Great One in captivity, her purpose hijacked to fuel the blood ministration of a city. This reveals the tragedy of the divine-human interface. When a Great One remains in the physical world, they are treated not as a god, but as a resource. The rise of the healing church's divinity was the extraction of Ebrietes's vitality. The physical appearance of Ebrietes, a grotesque yet ethereal blend of mollusk, fungus, and celestial wings, tells a story of the intersection of planes. The lore of the cosmos in the flesh suggests that she is a slug that is trying to become a star. Her purpose is to be the universal translator. Through her, the choir was able to reach the stars and communicate with the higher Great Ones. This is why her arena is the altar of despair. She is despairing because she is the only one of her kind who can hear the cosmos but cannot return to it. Her purpose is to be the living antenna for humanity. Every Holy Communion the choir performed was essentially a siphoning of her cosmic signal. The fall of the choir was the static caused by their own greed for the echo. The relationship between Ebrietes and the gravestone provides insight into her archaeological purpose. The greatest chalice was the first to be brought back to the surface, and it is said that the choir was born from this discovery. Ebrietes is the emissary of this. Her purpose is to keep the door open to the ancient reality. Unlike Ram, who hid the truth, Ebrietes exposed the truth. She allowed the scholars to see the glowing fungal forests and the celestial slugs of the higher planes. She is the god of discovery. This reveals a dualism of purpose among the Great Ones. While some, Ram, seek to protect through ignorance, others, Ebrietes, seek to evolve through knowledge. The rise of the choir was the embracing of the cosmic light, but that light was so bright it blinded them to the shadow of the beast within. Furthermore, the altar of despair itself is a piece of temporal lore. On the altar sits the petrified corpse of a spider-like entity that resembles Ram. The lore of the time-winding purpose suggests that Ebrietes has the power to manipulate the flow of life. By bringing the flesh of Annalise, the queen of the vile bloods, to this altar, the hunter can rewind her death. This reveals that Ebrietes's purpose is also the preservation of the eternal. She is the guardian of the unchanging. She mourns the dead Ram because Ram represented the stability of the world. Ebrietes's purpose is to hold the moment in a state of stasis. This makes her the antagonist of change. She does not want the hunt to end. She wants the sacred communion to last forever, even if it is built on a foundation of despair. The lore of the call beyond and the augur of Ebrietes, the arcane tools derived from her, represents the weaponization of her anatomy. The augur allows the hunter to summon her tentacles from the void. This reveals that Ebrietes is multilocational. Even though she is tethered to the altar, her essence is ubiquitous in the higher dimensions. Her purpose is to be a physical anchor for the ethereal. She allows the force of the stars to be felt in the physical world. This makes the protagonist a co-opted priest. By using her tools, the hunter is participating in her ritual. The rise of the hunter's arcane power is the extension of Ebrietes's grip on the material plane. The act concludes with the hunter's battle against Ebrietes. As she falls, she bleeds gray matter and celestial fluids, and the call beyond spell she uses is the final scream of the starbound. The lore of Part 6 establishes Ebrietes as the tragic conduit of the divine. She was a god who was used until she was empty. Her left-behind status was not an accident, but a sacrifice. She stayed behind so that the stars would have a witness on earth. The rise of the choir was her glory, and their fall was her solitude. The hunter realizes that in killing her, they have severed the last link between the city and the cosmos. The legacy of Ebrietas's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the holy. We realize that the sacrament of the church was a crime of the void. The old blood was not a gift from the sky. It was the tears of an abandoned daughter. The rise of our faith was the torture of a great one. As the hunter looks at the celestial fluid on their blade, they understand that the daughter of the cosmos was the most human of the gods. She was lonely, she was exploited, and she was broken. The fall of the altar is the final silence of the voice that tried to bridge the infinite. The 7th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose moves from the dry, stony cathedrals of the city to the salt-slicked shores of the fishing hamlet. This is the lore of Kos, or as some say, Cosm, the Great One of the Deep, and her tragic, stillborn progeny, the orphan. While the moon presence manages the hunt and Ebrietas acts as a bridge, the purpose of Kos is defined by the motherhood of the void. Kos represents the most biological and nurturing aspect of the Great Ones, a being who did not seek a human surrogate because she was already carrying her own true child. However, her purpose was shattered by the curiosity and greed of the first humans who found her. The lore of Kos is the lore of the primordial violation and the subsequent purpose of the eternal curse. The lore of the dead mother reveals that Kos washed ashore in the hamlet, already dying or perhaps already deceased, her body teeming with parasites. To the simple villagers, she was a miracle from the deep. But to the early scholars of Bergenworth, led by Gehrman and Lawrence, she was a biological jackpot. Her purpose, even in death, was to provide the seed of evolution. The scholars violated her corpse, harvesting her cord and experimenting on the villagers who had communed with her. This act transformed the Great One's purpose from creation to retribution. The hunter's nightmare was born from the grief of Kos. Her purpose shifted into the creation of a psychic purgatory designed to trap those who had tasted her blood and abused her secret. The rise of the hunter's nightmare is the fall of the hunter's soul into an infinite debt. The physical manifestation of this purpose is found in the orphan of Kos, the Great One who was never born. The orphan is the spirit of vengeance given form, a wizened, weeping figure that wields its own placenta as a weapon. The lore of the silent cry explains that the orphan's purpose is to be the anchor of the curse. As long as the orphan lives within the nightmare, the hunter's nightmare will continue to pull in blood-drunk hunters like a cosmic whirlpool. The orphan is the executioner of the Great One's justice. It does not seek to ascend or rule. It seeks only to grieve and to punish. Its purpose is to show humanity the price of deicide. The rise of the orphan's rage is the shattering of the hunter's martial confidence. By facing the orphan, the protagonist is facing the unfiltered consequence of human ambition. The relationship between Kos and the parasites that bear her name provides insight into the invasive purpose of the sea. The Kos parasite weapon and the milkweed rune reveal that Kos's legacy is one of symbiotic infestation. Unlike the old blood of the church which turns men into beasts, the parasites of Kos turn men into lumenwood, beings of light and water. This suggests that Kos's original purpose was an alternative evolution. She sought to turn humanity into celestial slugs, a form more compatible with the great deep. The fall of the fishing hamlet was the first experiment in this aquatic ascension. The purpose of Kos was to drown the earth in the cosmos, replacing the fire and stone of human civilization with the cold, luminous silence of the ocean. Furthermore, the lore of the black shadow that the hunter must strike after defeating the orphan's physical form is the true resolution of her purpose. This shadow is the lingering consciousness of the orphan, staring back at the pale blood moon. When the hunter strikes it, the message "Nightmare Slain" appears, and the sun begins to rise. This reveals that the purpose of the curse was waiting for a witness. The Great Ones do not want infinite pain. They want acknowledgement. The curse was a lock that could only be opened by someone who was willing to walk through the filth and grant mercy to the child. The rise of the hunter into the role of the redeemer is the final objective of the Hamlet's tragedy. The purpose of Kos was to find a human who could outgrow the greed of Byrgenworth. The accursed brew, a tool made from the skulls of the Hamlet, represents the bitterness of the forgotten. The lore suggests that the villagers were ransacked for eyes in their brains. This reveals the scientific sacrilege that defined the early days of the healing church. The purpose of the curse was to preserve the memory of the crime. The Great Ones serve as the cosmic historians. They do not let injustice go unrecorded. By trapping the old hunters, like Ludwig and Maria, in the nightmare, the purpose of Kos was to ensure that the guilty never awoke from their shame. The rise of the hunter through this nightmare is the audit of the soul. The act concludes with the hunter standing on the shore, watching the spirit of the orphan return to the sea. The ocean in Bloodborne lore is synonymous with the deepest layers of the dream. The lore of Part 7 establishes Kos as the tragic matriarch of the abyss. She was a god who wanted to give, but was taken from. Her purpose was to nurture, but her legacy was a curse. The hunter realizes that the beastly scourge of the city is almost merciful compared to the cold, eternal hatred of the sea. The rise of the sun over the hamlet is the end of the purgatory, and the fall of the orphan's cry is the beginning of the hunter's final ascension. The legacy of Kos's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the parental bond. We realize that the Great Ones are not just monsters. They are parents. The nightmare was not a labyrinth. It was a grave. And the hunter was not a slayer. They were a funeral director. As the hunter returns to the dream, they understand that the purpose of the god is often just the protection of the child. The fall of the hamlet was the death of an era, and the rise of the new god, the hunter, is the only way to avenge a mother whose love was stolen by the scythe of the scholars. The 8th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose brings us to the most grotesque and pitiable entity in the Menses ritual, the brain of Menses. Unlike Kos or Eden, who represent the natural or formless divinity of the cosmos, the brain is a Great One that was found or coaxed into existence through the desperate intellectualism of the school of Menses. The lore of the brain is the lore of the failed ascension. While it is classified as a Great One, it is a being of rot, static, and pure nightmare. Its purpose is the manifestation of the forbidden gaze. It exists as a living testament to the human failure to perceive the eldritch truth without the proper internal eyes. It is the god of the short circuit, a biological disaster that radiates frenzy to anyone within its sight, proving that some purposes are born not of divine will, but of human error. The lore of the rotting intellect reveals that the brain was the prize of the Menses ritual. The scholars, led by Michaelash, sought to bridge the gap between human thought and the great deep. The brain's purpose was to be the universal receiver. It was meant to capture the thoughts of the cosmos and translate them into a language the school could understand. However, the frequency of the Great Ones was too powerful for the material vessel. The brain became brain-dead. It lost its ability to communicate and instead became a psychic siren, emitting a constant, agonizing pulse of truth that destroys the human mind. This reveals the terror of the incomplete. The Great One's purpose in this instance is accidental cruelty. It is a god that is broken from the moment of its discovery, trapped in a tower of iron, the loft, because its gaze is too lethal for the world below. The physical environment surrounding the brain, the pitch-black abyss beneath the loft, provides insight into the isolation of the divine. When the hunter pulls the lever and drops the brain into the darkness, they are ending the surveillance. The lore of the quiet void suggests that the brain's purpose in the darkness shifts from aggressive radiance to vulnerable observation. In the dark, the brain no longer causes frenzy. It simply is. This represents the true nature of the eldritch purpose when stripped of human artifice. Without the chains of the school of Menses and the light of the ritual, The Great One is just a small, frightened thing. The rise of the hunter into this darkness is the first time the brain has been treated not as a tool, but as a sentient being. This is the audience of the abyss. The relationship between the brain and the make-a-gesture interaction, deep respect, reveals the requirement of acknowledgement. If the hunter stands before the brain in the dark and performs the gesture for several minutes, the brain grants them the moon rune, the highest tier of its kind. The lore of the Silent Communion explains that the brain's purpose was to find someone who could look at the madness and not blink. By standing still in the presence of the rotting god, the hunter demonstrates a transcendental patience. The brain rewards this with insight that goes beyond blood. This reveals that even a failed Great One has the purpose of teaching through stillness. It is the professor of the void. The rise of the hunter's understanding through this gesture is the only success the School of Menses ever actually achieved, not through their rituals, but through the hunter's empathy. Furthermore, the lore of the living string, the material obtained by killing the brain, provides a biological definition of its purpose. The string is used to access the great Thumaru Ihil chalice, the deepest part of the tombs. This reveals that the brain is the physical key to history. Its purpose was to tether the modern nightmare to the ancient past. By harvesting the brain, the hunter is stringing the two eras together. This makes the protagonist the weaver of the timeline. The brain's purpose was to die, so that the hunter could go deeper. It is a sacrificial milestone in the evolution of the new god. The fall of the brain is the opening of the grave of the Thumerian queen. The many eyes that cover the brain's surface represent the saturation of sight. The lore suggests that the School of Menses tried to attach eyes to the brain to make it see better. This is the augmentation of the divine. Their purpose was to make a god that sees everything. But the result was a god that sees too much and understands nothing. It is the god of data without context. This serves as a moral warning for the hunter's own insight journey. If the hunter collects too many eyes without the heart to process them, they will end up like the brain, a mass of nerves in a dark pit. The brain's purpose is to be the Menses monument of failure. It is the tombstone of the intellectual path. The act concludes with the hunter striking the flesh of the brain. It does not fight back. It simply accepts the end. The lore of Part 8 establishes the brain of Menses as the tragedy of the man-made god. It was a great one that was born of pride and nurtured by madness. Its purpose was to elevate the school, but its reality was to torment them. The hunter realizes that the ascension sought by Michaelash was a hallucination. The brain was not a step forward, but a biological dead end. The rise of the hunter into the final layers of the hunt is only possible because they have cleared the static of the brain's screams. The legacy of the brain's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the observation. We realize that seeing is not enough. One must have the will to process. The brain was a camera with no film, a radio with no speaker. Its purpose was to witness the end of the world, and in the hunter, it finally saw the actor who would end its sight. As the hunter climbs back up to the loft, they understand that the purpose of the god can sometimes be as simple as wishing to be blind. The fall of the brain is the first true silence the hunter has experienced in the nightmare. The 9th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose ascends to the highest point of the Menses ritual loft, where the physical world dissolves into a celestial cradle. Here, the hunter encounters Murgo's wet nurse, an entity that embodies the lore of the ethereal custodian. While many Great Ones seek to harvest or consume, the wet nurse exists for the singular, protective purpose of divine preservation. She is the sovereign nanny of the cosmos, a being of shadow, multiple blades, and no visible face, tasked with the stilling of the most dangerous entity in the nightmare, Murgo, the formless infant of the Thumerian queen. The lore of the wet nurse is the lore of the protective void. Her purpose is to ensure that the cries of a Great One's child are never interrupted by the reality of the waking world. She is the shield of the nightmare, and her presence is the only thing preventing the psychic collapse of the entire Menses dimension. The lore of the formless infant reveals that Murgo, like its father Eden, has no physical body. It exists only as a sound, a constant, haunting cry that can be heard through the music box or in the final stages of the nightmare. The wet nurse's purpose is to be the vessel of the voice. She provides the anatomy of protection for a child that cannot be held. This reveals the maternal architecture of the Great Ones. The wet nurse is not Murgo's biological mother, the queen is, but she is the spiritual surrogate provided by the cosmos to ensure the child's survival in the no-man's land of the dream. Her purpose is the maintenance of the echo. As long as the wet nurse stands, the nightmare is sustained by Murgo's grief. This makes the wet nurse the engine of the ritual. To the school of Menses, she was the guardian of their prize. To the Great Ones, she is the gravekeeper of the stillborn. The physical combat with the wet nurse provides insight into her martial purpose. She wields a multitude of curved blades with a mechanical precision that suggests she is more of a construct or a concept than a biological organism. The lore of the bladed shadow explains that her purpose is to cut away the intruder. She does not use frenzy or arcane magic. She uses physical erasure. When she summons the purple mist, she is blinding the hunter to the reality of the arena. This is the obfuscation of the divine. Her purpose is to keep the child in darkness, for light is the enemy of the formless. By slaying the wet nurse, the hunter is not just winning a fight. They are exposing the infant to the cold air of reality. This is the cruelty of the midwife. The hunter is peeling away the protection to reach the heart of the echo. The relationship between the wet nurse and the Queen of Yharnam is the most sympathetic part of her purpose. After the wet nurse is defeated, the queen is seen standing on the balcony, bowing to the hunter. This suggests that the wet nurse's purpose had become a source of torment for the mother. The wet nurse was holding Murgo hostage in a state of eternal infancy. The lore of the forced longevity suggests that Murgo was being used by the Great Ones as a power source. The wet nurse was the governor of that power. By stopping the music and killing the nurse, the hunter is granting the queen her mercy. The purpose of the Great One was to keep the child alive, but the purpose of the hunter is to let the child die. This is the liberation through silence. The rise of the nightmare slain message is the fall of the divine shackles. Furthermore, the 1/3 of umbilical cord obtained from the wet nurse is the key to her biological purpose. This cord is the link between the nurse and the baby. The lore of the cord of the loft explains that the wet nurse was suckling the child on the ambition of the moon presence. This reveals a conspiratorial purpose. The wet nurse may have been an agent of the moon presence, sent to fatten Murgo for a later harvest. This turns the protective nanny into a cosmic farmer. She was guarding the crop. This explains why her death is required to end the hunt. The moon presence wants the hunter to cut the cord so that the essence of Murgo can be reclaimed by the dream. The rise of the hunter's power is the result of this stolen divinity. The lore of the music box and the lullaby that plays during the fight represents the sedative purpose of the nurse. The Great Ones are addicted to the peace of the void. The wet nurse's purpose was to quiet the child so that the gods could sleep. This makes her the bore of the cosmos. She represents the stagnation of the nightmare. In the higher planes, change is painful. The wet nurse exists to prevent change. This is the antagonism of the new. By killing her, the hunter is waking the universe from its lullaby. The rise of the hunter into the role of the new Great One is only possible because they have shattered the quiet of the wet nurse's regime. The act concludes with the final cry of the infant Murgo. As the wet nurse dissipates into gray ash, the hunter hears a soft sob followed by a silence that is deeper than any they have known. The lore of Part 9 establishes Murgo's wet nurse as the guardian of the end times. She was the last barrier between the human and the divine secret. Her purpose was to nurture the void, but her fate was to be dismantled by the steel of the workshop. The hunter realizes that the nightmare was just a nursery with too many locks. The rise of the hunter's insight is the hand that unlocked the door and put the baby to bed for the last time. The legacy of the wet nurse's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the eternal infancy. We realize that safety can be a prison. The wet nurse was saving Murgo from death, but she was also denying him life. Her purpose was a stagnant love. As the hunter looks at their blood-stained blades, they understand that the purpose of the god is often to freeze a moment forever, while the purpose of the hunter is to force the clock to tick again. The fall of the wet nurse is the start of the future. The 10th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose brings us to the secluded, flower-choked gardens of the Upper Cathedral Ward. Here, beneath the luminous lumenflower blooms, we encounter the celestial emissary, an entity that defines the lore of the cultivated surrogate. Unlike the natural great ones like Kos or the formless Eden, the celestial emissary is a great one, produced through the direct, scientific intervention of the choir. This is the lore of the harvest of the innocents. The emissary's purpose is to act as a biological beacon, a bridge between the physical matter of the earth and the ethereal light of the stars. It is the communication hub of the healing church, a being specifically engineered to facilitate holy contact with the higher planes. Its purpose is the standardization of the human soul into a great one format that is both manageable and repeatable. The lore of the Blue Children reveals that the emissary is the final result of a massive, industrial-scale experiment. The children of the orphanage were not merely orphans. They were soil. The purpose of the Great Ones, as interpreted by the choir, was to infect the young with celestial spores. This is the agriculture of the astral. By planting eyes in the brains of children, the choir created the Blue Children, pale, bobble-headed beings that represent a partial success of the Great One's purpose. They are antennae without a radio. The celestial emissary itself is the one who succeeded. Its purpose is to be the speaker for the garden. It is a great one that still carries the stain of human biology, making it the perfect translation device for the choir to talk to the cosmos. The rise of the emissary is the fall of human individuality. It is a god born of 1,000 sacrificed smiles. The physical environment of the Lumenflower Garden provides insight into the botanical purpose of the celestial. The lumenflowers are not merely decorative. They are organs that listen to the stars. The lore of the sensorial garden suggests that the emissary's purpose is to manage the signal. It acts as a gardener of the ghostly, ensuring that the resonance from the higher great ones, specifically Ebrietas, who waits just below, is properly amplified. This reveals a hierarchical purpose. The emissary is a lesser great one, whose function is to serve the greater. It is the mid-level manager of the choir's divinity. This makes the emissary the god of the bureaucracy. Its purpose is to keep the files of the cosmic connection organized. The rise of the hunter into this garden is the incursion of the wild into a manicured heaven. The relationship between the emissary and the Akal Beyond spell provides a terrifying look at the weaponization of communion. The spell, which is described as a failed attempt to communicate with the stars, results in a violent explosion of celestial light. This reveals that the emissary's purpose is a dangerous filter. When humans try to talk to the Great Ones directly, they explode into stardust. The emissary exists to absorb that shock. It is a celestial surge protector. By killing the emissary, the hunter is removing the fuse. This is why the area becomes so much more active with brainsuckers and madness once the emissary falls. The protection of the standardized god is gone, and the unfiltered void begins to leak into the cathedral. Furthermore, the Ischalus connection remains vital here. The lore of the Upper Cathedral Seed suggests that the emissary is an invasive species from the Is plane. The Great One's purpose for the emissary was to colonize the earthly mind. They provided the blueprints to the choir so that the choir would do the work of infecting the human race for them. This is the automated purpose. The Great Ones are too grand to perform the dirty work of evolution. They outsource it to human cults. The emissary is the project manager sent from Is to oversee the factory. This turns the Holy Church into a cosmic sweatshop. The rise of the emissary is the expansion of the Is Empire into the Yharnam territory. The lore of the blue elixir, a medicinal liquid that numbs the brain, is a testament to the sedative purpose of this lineage. To become an emissary, one must be numb. One must forget what it is to be human. This is the erasure of the subject. The Great Ones require a blank page to write their celestial script. The purpose of the emissary is to be that blankness. This makes the boss fight, where the true emissary hides among dozens of identical blue children, a metaphor for the lost self. You cannot find the individual because the Great One's purpose has deleted the individual. The fall of the emissary is the end of the facelessness. When the hunter strikes the true one, they are breaking the hive mind. The act concludes with the hunter shattering the window behind the emissary's garden to find Ebrietas. This reveals that the emissary was merely a decorative door. Its purpose was to hide the sorrow of the real God beneath. The emissary was the public face of the choir's success, a glowing, happy God that distracted from the crying, bleeding daughter in the basement. The lore of Part 10 establishes the celestial emissary as the propaganda of the void. It was a Great One built to be palatable. Its purpose was to make madness look like ascension. The hunter realizes that the blue children were not blessed. They were overwritten. The rise of the hunter's arcane fire is the cleansing of this artificial paradise. The legacy of the emissary's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the collective. We realize that godhood can be a factory. The emissary was a product with a label and a function. Its purpose was to mass-produce the divine. As the hunter wipes the blue fluid from their boots, they understand that the purpose of the god can sometimes be as cold as a corporate takeover. The fall of the emissary is the death of the experiment, and the rise of the hunter is the return of the individual to a world that tried to turn everyone into a blue, silent child. The 11th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose moves from the grand architects of the cosmos to the scavengers of the mind, the brainsuckers. While the celestial emissary represents the marketing of the healing church's success, the brainsuckers represent the enforcement of the intellectual toll. These entities are widely considered to be lesser Great Ones or failed choir scholars who have undergone a specific parasitic transformation. The lore of the brainsucker is the lore of the selective extraction. Their purpose is to serve as the cosmic debt collectors of Yharnam. They do not seek to kill for meat or territory. They seek to siphon the insight, the literal internal eyes, of those who have dared to look too closely at the sun. Their purpose is the regulation of knowledge through a biological tax. The lore of the insight siphon reveals a terrifying economy of the soul. Insight is the currency of the Great Ones, a measurement of how much truth a human can hold. The brainsucker's purpose is to ensure that this truth is not hoarded by the unworthy. This is the redistribution of wisdom. When a brainsucker captures the hunter and sucks the insight from their skull, it is not merely eating, it is reclaiming the celestial energy for the void. This reveals a restrictive purpose. The Great Ones use these entities to gatekeep the higher dimensions. If a hunter becomes too knowledgeable, but lacks the strength to defend their mind, the brainsucker resets them. The rise of the hunter's insight is a lighthouse that attracts these predators, and their purpose is to extinguish the flame before it can ignite a revolution of the mind. The physical anatomy of the brainsucker, specifically its fluid, tentacled face, and its ability to cast binding spells, tells a story of the stifling of the subject. The lore of the arcane glue suggests that these creatures utilize the leftover resonance of ebrietas to freeze their prey. This is the paralysis of the witness. Their purpose is to stop the observer. By locking the hunter in place, they are pausing the hunt. This reveals the anti-kinetic purpose of the lesser gods. They represent the stagnation that occurs when insight is not paired with action. The brainsucker is the scholar who has become a vampire, a being that can no longer create its own truth and must steal it from the thinking brains of others. The rise of the brainsucker in the upper cathedral ward is the bureaucracy of the choir turned into a predatory instinct. The relationship between the brainsuckers and the slug imagery is vital. They are often found in damp, dark places, and their skin has a slimy, gastropod texture. The lore of the slow descent suggests that they are the intermediate stage of the Great One's purpose. They are what happens when a human ascends without the umbilical cords. They become biological halfway houses. Their purpose is to be the failed templates. They show the hunter what happens when you listen to the cosmos but don't have the ears to filter the noise. They are the garbage disposals of the choir's laboratory, tasked with cleaning up the excess insight that leaks from the experiments. Their purpose is to be the sanitation crew of the secret. Furthermore, the quicksilver and arcane nature of their attacks provides insight into the resource management of the Great Ones. The brainsuckers are mana-hungry. Their purpose is to drain the battery of the hunter. By taking the protagonist's arcane potential, they are feeding the dream. This reveals the parasitic cycle of power. The Great Ones provide the blood to the city creates insight, and the brainsuckers reclaim that insight to keep the gods awake. It is a closed-loop system of mental slavery. The rise of the hunter's arcane skill is the investment, and the brainsucker is the market crash. The purpose of these entities is to ensure that nothing is lost to the individual. Every bit of god knowledge must eventually return to the god. The lore of the brainsucker's arena in the Chalice dungeons reveals their ancient standing. They are not just a modern invention of the choir. They existed in the Themerian era. This means their purpose is fundamental to the hunt. They are the natural inhibitors of the eldritch fever. In the labyrinth, their purpose was to prevent the Watchers from becoming Great Ones. They are the quality control of the universe. Only the strongest, the protagonist, can withstand the siphon and keep their eyes. This makes the brainsucker the test of mental fortitude. If the hunter falls to the siphon, they were never ready for the pale blood moon. The act concludes with the hunter slaying the sucker and reclaiming a pebble or bloodstone shard. The insight, however, is gone forever. This is the irreversibility of the toll. The lore of Part 11 establishes the brainsucker as the censor of the cosmos. It was a Great One built to delete the file. Its purpose was to keep the top-tier secrets out of lower-tier hands. The hunter realizes that the price of knowledge is constant vigilance. The rise of the hunter's blade is the only defense against the theft of the self. In a world where thought is food, the brainsucker is the hungriest guest at the feast of the mind. The legacy of the brainsucker's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the intellectual void. We realize that our memories and understanding are not ours. They are borrowed properties. The brainsucker is the landlord coming to evict the knowledge. Its purpose was to remind the hunter that they are a guest in the mind of a god. As the hunter feels the cold, slimy grip around their throat, they understand that the purpose of the god is often to keep the truth for themselves. The fall of the insight count is the rise of the eldritch humility. The 12th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose moves away from the towering titans and predatory scholars to the most humble, yet most essential units of eldritch life, the celestial slugs or phantasms. These small, glowing invertebrates are often found in the abandoned old workshop and the upper cathedral ward, and they serve as the cellular infrastructure of the divine. While the moon presence is the mind and Eden is the blood, the slugs are the connective tissue. The lore of the slug is the lore of the biological bridge. Their purpose is to act as the living conductors of arcane energy, allowing the higher will of the Great Ones to interface with the physical matter of the earth. They are the micro-architects of the nightmare, and without them, the Great One's purpose would remain a theory without a body. The lore of the phantasm symbiosis reveals that these creatures are familiars of the Great Ones. Their purpose is the infestation of the medium. In the Bloodborne universe, whenever a human attempts to cast an arcane spell, such as the empty phantasm shell, they are not using magic in the traditional sense. They are using the excretions and resonance of these slugs. This is the technological purpose of the organic. The Great Ones use the slugs to lubricate the path between dimensions. By coating a weapon in phantasm shells, the hunter is synchronizing their blade with the frequency of the abyss. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is interplanar expansion. They use the slugs as terraforming agents, turning the solid world of man into a fluid world of starlight and slime. The rise of the slug is the softening of reality. The physical appearance of the slugs, small, translucent, and possessing a mollusk-like simplicity, provides insight into the evolutionary origin of the gods. The lore of the primordial gastropod suggests that all Great Ones begin their journey as slugs. This is the cycle of the invertebrate. When the hunter achieves the true ending and becomes a squid-like infant, they are returning to this fundamental form. The purpose of the slugs is to serve as the genetic seed bank. They are the larval state of divinity. This reveals a patient purpose. The Great Ones do not arrive fully formed. They seep into a world through the smallest cracks. The slugs are the scouts. They are the pioneer species of the cosmos, sent to test the soil of the human brain to see if it can support a full-scale ascension. The relationship between the slugs and the Bergenworth scholars is the most instrumental part of their purpose. Master Willem and his students found that the slugs were inhabited by the will of the stars. The lore of the pearl slug, found in the Chalice dungeons, explains that these creatures are signs of a Great One's presence. Their purpose is to be the cosmic fingerprint. By studying the slime trails of these entities, the humans were able to map the dream. This makes the slug the instruction manual of the Godhead. The purpose of the slug was to guide the blind. However, because humans are rigid and slugs are fluid, the guidance resulted in the melting of the human frame. The rise of the choir was the dissolving of the bone into the slime of the slug. Furthermore, the empty phantasm shell specifically highlights the residual purpose of the divine. Even when the Great One has left or the spirit has departed, the shell remains arcane. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is permanent alteration. Once a place or an object has been touched by the celestial, it is changed forever. The slugs are the ink that the Great Ones use to write their name on the world. Their purpose is to be the evidence of the inevitable. When the hunter finds these slugs in the abandoned workshop, it proves that the dream was not just a vision, it was a biological colonization. The fall of the old workshop was the rise of the slugs in the cracks of the floorboards. The lore of the pearl slug, as a material for the great chalice, reveals their geological purpose. In the deep labyrinth, the slugs are the lights of the dark. They feed on the echoes of the dead to produce lumen. This is the energy conversion purpose. They turn grief into glow. This reveals a merciful side to the eldritch. They provide beauty in the heart of the grave. However, this beauty is alien and cold. The purpose of the slug is to remind the hunter that life in the cosmos does not look like life on Earth. It is a redefinition of the vital. The rise of the slug god, the hunter, is the final acceptance of this small, slimy truth. The act concludes with the hunter stepping on a slug, only for it to emit a burst of blue light. It does not die in the traditional sense. Its essence simply disperses. The lore of Part 12 establishes the celestial slug as the atom of the nightmare. It was a Great One in microcosm. Its purpose was to be the medium through which the master could paint. The hunter realizes that the ascension is not a step up a ladder, but a dissolving into the ocean. The rise of the new god is the shedding of the shell and the embracing of the crawl. In a world of vast, silent moons, the slug is the voice that says, "The stars are wet." The legacy of the slug's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the small. We realize that we are not being invaded by giant monsters from the sky, but by small, glowing slugs from the inside. The Great One's purpose is a cellular takeover. As the hunter watches the phantasm shell glow on their sword, they understand that the purpose of the god is to turn everything into its own slime. The fall of the human anatomy is the rise of the celestial gastropod. The 13th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose focuses on the most ubiquitous, yet mysterious, inhabitants of the hunter's dream, the messengers. These small, gray, skeletal figures rise from the ground to offer items, hold lanterns, and carry the hunter's notes across the veil of reality. While other Great Ones manifest as engines of destruction or consumption, the messengers represent the lore of the divine symbionts. They are the small gentlings of the cosmos, and their purpose is to act as the relay system of the nightmare. They are the lesser attendants of the moon presence, serving the vital function of facilitating the hunt. Their purpose is to ensure that the chosen hunter is never disconnected from the resources of the dream. They are the intermediaries of fate, and their existence is the only reason the protagonist survives the first hour of the night. The lore of the inhabitants of the dream reveals that the messengers are sovereign denizens who find comfort in the presence of the hunter. Their purpose is the sanctification of the tool. Unlike the brainsuckers who steal insight, the messengers give. They are the merchants of the void. This reveals a nurturing purpose within the Great One's framework. The moon presence realizes that a blade cannot swing itself. It needs maintenance. The messengers are the logistics division of the apocalypse. Their purpose is to scavenge the blood and echoes from the waking world and transmute them into supplies, vials, bullets, gems, for the hunter. This creates a mercantile symbiosis. The rise of the hunter's power is a joint venture with these small, rotting creatures. Their purpose is to invest in the Great One's champion. The physical appearance of the messengers, resembling mummified infants or emaciated spirits, provides insight into the origin of the servant. The lore of the echoes of the unborn suggests that the messengers are the fragmented souls of those who were lost to the dream in previous cycles. They are the residual spirits of the failed. Their purpose is to serve the successor. This is the legacy of the abandoned. Because they could not ascend as individuals, they have merged into a collective purpose. They represent the humility of the multitude. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is often to recycle the waste. Nothing is truly lost in the dream. It is merely repurposed into a hand that holds a lantern. The rise of the messengers is the fall of the individual hunter into the collective servitude. The relationship between the messengers and the notes, the orange glowing scrawls on the ground, is the most metaphysical part of their purpose. The lore of the Archive of Whispers explains that the messengers live within the words of the hunters. Their purpose is to be the connective tissue of time. They allow a hunter from one reality to warn or guide a hunter in another. This reveals the temporal purpose of the Great Ones. They want the hunt to be a learning machine. The messengers are the data stream. By carrying these messages, they ensure that the mistakes of the past are passed down to the future. They are the librarians of the nightmare. This makes the protagonist part of a transdimensional guild. The purpose of the messengers is to keep the conversation alive even after the speaker has been eaten by the beasts. Furthermore, the adoration of the hunter through the use of messengers' ribbons or hats reveals the emotional purpose of the small ones. The messengers love the hunter, but it is a venerating parasitic love. They mirror the hunter's identity. If the hunter wears a crown, the messengers want to wear a crown. This is the mimicry of the divine. Their purpose is to reflect the master. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is to create a cult of personality. The moon presence wants the hunter to feel like a king, so that the hunter will slay more gods. The messengers are the audience of the ego. They provide the validation necessary for a human to continue fighting in a world that has given up on life. The rise of the hunter's charisma is the fuel for the messenger's devotion. The lore of the nightmare fog and the lanterns, provides insight into the geographical purpose of the servants. The messengers are the ones who light the way. Without their lanterns, the hunter would be lost in the deep. Their purpose is to be the navigational beacons of the Great One. They hold the door open between the dream and the grave. This makes them the guardians of the portal. This reveals a territorial purpose. The Great Ones use the messengers to claim areas of the waking world. Wherever a lamp is lit, that soil now belongs to the hunter's dream. The rise of the lamps across Yharnam is the shadow mapping of the city. The messengers are the flags planted by an invading god. The act concludes with the hunter interacting with a messenger at the bath stump. The exchange is silent, but meaningful. The lore of Part 13 establishes the messengers as the unsung mechanics of the cosmos. They are the lesser purpose that makes the greater purpose possible. Their purpose was to be the love that humanity forgot, manifesting in the darkest pits of the nightmare. The hunter realizes that while the moon is cold and the beasts are angry, the messengers are kind. It is a grotesque kindness, but in the Bloodborne world, it is the only mercy that doesn't bite. The legacy of the messenger's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the servant. We realize that we are being cheered on by a graveyard. The rise of our success is the celebration of the dead. The messenger's purpose was to remind the hunter that they are never alone, but only because the dead are watching. As the hunter accepts a blood vial from a small gray hand, they understand that the purpose of the god is to keep the hunter happy just long enough to kill the boss. The fall of the individual is the rise of the little gentling. The 14th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose moves into the suffocating, snake-infested depths of the Forbidden Woods. Here, standing as a final barrier before the secrets of Byrgenwerth, we encounter the shadows of Yharnam. These hooded, multiphasic entities represent the lore of the divine retainers. While the messengers serve the hunter, the shadows serve the ancient bloodline. They are the Vatican guards of the Great Ones, beings that exist to fulfill the purpose of dynastic insulation. Their presence reveals that the Great One's purpose is not just about creating new life, but about protecting the ancestry. They are the gallows-bound remnants of a Themerian covenant, and their purpose is to ensure that the path to the lake remains closed to any who do not bear the eldritch signature of the inner circle. The lore of the Themerian shadow reveals that these are not men, but manifestations of the Queen's will. Their purpose is the enforcement of the forbidden. This is why they guard the route to Byrgenwerth and the Lunar Lake. The Great Ones, specifically those involved with the Queen of Yharnam and the child Murgo, require a buffer zone between their holy ground and the savage hunt of the city. The shadows are the diplomatic immunity of the nightmare. Their purpose is to sanitize the woods of any low-insight interference. This creates a territorial sanctity. The rise of the shadow's aggression is the final warning of the cosmos. Their purpose is to filter the hunter. If you cannot defeat the servants, you have no right to face the master. This reveals the elitist purpose of the Great Ones. They do not want to be found by the weak. The physical combat with the shadows provides insight into their pyromantic and serpentile purpose. The fact that they can summon giant snakes from the earth and breathe fire suggests that they are tethered to the primal. The lore of the serpent's coil explains that the Great Ones use baser organisms, like snakes, as security systems. The shadows are the handlers of the hiss. Their purpose is to weaponize the forest. This reveals a totalitarian environmental purpose. The Great Ones do not just inhabit the city, they infect the nature surrounding it. The rise of the giant snakes in the second phase of the fight is the nature of the earth, rising to defend its gods. The shadows' purpose is to be the commanders of the corruption. They turn the flora and fauna into a living trap for the hunter. The relationship between the shadows and the Queen of Yharnam, found later in the loft, is the core of their chivalric purpose. In the lore of the Eternal Vigil, the shadows are described as the bodyguards of the Red Moon. They follow the trail of the Blood Moon wherever it goes. This reveals that their purpose is mobile defense. They are the escort for the divine pregnancy. When the hunter defeats them, they are essentially assassinating the Queen's guard. This makes the protagonist a regicide of the astral. The purpose of the shadows was to prevent the abortion of the nightmare. By killing them, the hunter is clearing the path to Ram and subsequently to the birth of the end times. The rise of the hunter's steel is the shattering of the ancient oath. Furthermore, the appearance of the shadows in the Menzies loft, near the end of the game, highlights their transdimensional purpose. They exist in both the waking woods and the highest nightmare. This suggests that they are universal guards. Their purpose is to be the shadow templates. They represent the indestructible will of the Themerian past. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is historical continuity. They want to keep the old ways alive even as the new world burns. The shadows are the statues that walk. Their purpose is to remind the hunter that the hunt is an ancient ceremony, not a new sport. The rise of the shadows in the loft is the last stand of the old guard against the new god, the protagonist. The lore of the Shadow of Yharnam, as a boss in the Chalice dungeons, confirms their cyclical purpose. They have been guarding the deep places for millennia. Their purpose is to be the eternal constant. While hunters die and beasts rot, the shadows remain. This is the consistency of the void. They represent the unblinking eye of the law. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is to establish a legal framework for the supernatural. There are rules to the forbidden, and the shadows are the judges. By slaying them, the hunter is writing a new law. This is the anarchy of the ascension. The act concludes with the hunter slaying the Trinity in the mud of the woods. The vermin and snakes retreat into the shadows. The lore of Part 14 establishes the Shadows of Yharnam as the gatekeepers of the bloodline. They were the silencers of the woods. Their purpose was to keep the secret of Burgenworth from ignorant hands. The hunter realizes that the Great Ones are not just lone entities, but institutions. They have armies, oaths, and legacy. The rise of the hunter into the College of the Moon is only possible because they have executed the Sentinels of the Sun. The legacy of the Shadow's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the duty. We realize that we are fighting for the right to know, while they are fighting to protect the sacred. The Shadow's purpose was to remind the hunter that truth is a fortress that must be sieged. As the hunter sheathes their sword and looks toward the moonlight hitting the lake, they understand that the purpose of the god is to hide the beginning so that the end can arrive unannounced. The fall of the shadows is the rise of the blinding truth. The 15th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose takes us to the absolute foundation of the nightmare, the Great Thumeru Ihil Chalice. Here, we encounter the bloodletting beast, a creature that embodies the lore of the original sin of the flesh. While the moon presence is a strategic mind and the amygdala are watchers, the bloodletting beast represents the purpose of the biological anchor. It is widely believed to be the source of the beastly scourge, a great one, or a being on the cusp of divinity that has been mutilated by its own power. Its purpose is the testing of the vessel. It serves as a living warning of what happens when the Great One's purpose meets a physical body that is too rigid to contain it. It is the god of the malformed, and its existence is the black box of the Themerian collapse. The lore of the primordial host reveals that the Great Ones utilized this entity as a womb of infection. Its purpose was the incubation of the scourge. In the deep labyrinth, the bloodletting beast acted as the original donor for the Themerians' blood experiments. This reveals a sovereign cruelty. The Great Ones did not give the old blood as a gift. They used the bloodletting beast as a filter to see how much god blood a mortal race could consume before they popped. This is the stress test of the soul. The rise of the Themerian civilization was built upon the blood of this caged god, and its purpose was to provide until the recipients either ascended or be-stiffied. The fall of the Ihilian royalty suggests that the beast won the race. The physical state of the beast, specifically its headless variant found in the deepest layers, tells a story of decapitated divinity. The lore of the parasitic mind explains that when the beast lost its head, it did not die. Instead, a giant centipede, reminiscent of the parasites of Kos, emerged from its neck. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is indestructible vitality. Even when the identity, the head, is removed, the will to exist, the parasite, continues. This is the autonomy of the organism. The purpose of the bloodletting beast is to show the hunter that the eldritch truth is not found in the face, but in the nervous system. It is a god of the reflex, a being that functions on primal impulse. The rise of the parasite from the stump is the evidence of the unstoppable life that the Great Ones seek to plant within the earth. The relationship between the bloodletting beast and the healing church provides insight into the archaeological plunder. The lore of the Holy Medium suggests that Lawrence and the scholars did not find Ebrietas first. They found the beast or its blood. The purpose of the beast was to be the template for the church. Every cleric beast in Yharnam is a miniature echo of this primordial titan. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is franchised evolution. They created a master beast and then distributed its essence through the blood vials. The rise of the church's power was the dilution of the bloodletting beast's original purpose. The city became a refinery of the scourge, turning the divine tragedy of the labyrinth into a local epidemic. Furthermore, the vermined blood found within the beast highlights the corruptive purpose of the deep. The lore suggests that the bloodletting beast is the father of the League's vermin. Its purpose is to be the universal pollutant. It ensures that pure humanity can never exist again. This is the permanent staining of the species. Once the blood has been let, the human becomes a hybrid. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is the eradication of the ordinary. They want a world of monsters and gods, with nothing in between. The bloodletting beast is the hammer that breaks the human mold. The rise of the beast-eater Valter and his league is the immune system of the world trying to fight back against the purpose of the infected god. The lore of the bloodletting itself, the act of spilling its own life force, reveals a mortal masochism. The beast attacks with suicidal ferocity, often smashing the ground and its own limbs to reach the hunter. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is sacrifice through violence. They believe that truth is only revealed when the skin is ripped. The bloodletting beast is the holy butcher. Its purpose is to expose the insides. This makes the boss fight a physical confession. By letting the blood, the beast is revealing the cosmos hidden within the marrow. The rise of the hunter's beast blood pellet addiction is the success of this masochistic purpose. The act concludes with the hunter slaying the source. As the headless titan collapses, the parasite shrivels into the neck. The lore of Part 15 establishes the bloodletting beast as the broken pillar of the Themerian era. It was a great one that failed its anatomy. Its purpose was to be the seed of the scourge, and in the church, it found a willing gardener. The hunter realizes that the beast within the city is not a disease, but a divine intent that went rancid in the heat of the human heart. The rise of the hunter past this beast is the final clearance of the Themerian sin. The legacy of the bloodletting beast's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the biological incompatibility. We realize that the Great One's purpose is too big for a mammal. The beast is what happens when a god tries to fit into a dog. Its purpose was to remind the hunter that flesh is a prison that will burst under the weight of the stars. As the hunter wipes the ancient blood from their eyes, they understand that the purpose of the god is to replace the meat with light. The fall of the beast is the death of the animal soul. The 16th chapter in our 17-part exploration of the Great One's purpose reaches the cold, weeping heart of the Themerian civilization, Queen Yharnam. Though she appears human, the queen is the ultimate expression of the lore of the divine vessel. She is the mother of the nightmare, the woman whose bloodline was chosen by the Great Ones to act as the primary incubator for their terrestrial offspring. The lore of the queen is the lore of the consumed monarch. Her purpose was to serve as the biological bridge between the ancient Themerians and the formless entities of the cosmos, specifically Eden. She is the holy womb, whose tragedy defines the entire Bloodborne cycle. Her purpose reveals that the Great Ones view human royalty not as leaders, but as high-quality bioreactors for the sovereign birth. The lore of the Red Moon wedding reveals the horrific success of her purpose. In the ancient past, Queen Yharnam successfully conceived the child Murgo through a communion of blood with a Great One. This was the ascension of the lineage. However, the Great One's purpose for the queen was one-time use. Once the child of blood was conceived, the mother became redundant. This is the disposable divinity. The Themerians, in their gilded greed, attempted to harvest the child, leading to the betrayal that left the queen stained and bound. Her purpose was to be the eternal mourner. She exists as a spirit in the nightmare and a boss in the labyrinth to ensure that the blood debt is never forgotten. The rise of her ghostly presence in the city is a warning that the Great One's purpose always ends in a crying mother and a stillborn god. The physical combat with the queen in the Great Thumeru Ihil Chalice provides insight into her blood artillery purpose. She attacks by slitting her own wrists and projecting her blood as blades and spears. The lore of the sovereign hematology explains that her blood is sentient. It carries the will of the Great Ones. Her purpose is to be the living weapon of the bloodline. She does not use arcane magic. She uses the transmuted vitality of her own body. This reveals the autophagic nature of the Great One's purpose. To serve the gods, the vessel must consume itself. The queen is a god of sacrifice. Her purpose is to show the hunter that power comes at the cost of anatomy. The rise of her blood clones during the fight is the evidence of the fragmented self that occurs when one becomes a host for the infinite. The relationship between the queen and the ring of betrothal provides the most intimate look at her purpose. The ring allows the hunter to propose to the queen, only for her to reject them. The lore of the celestial marriage suggests that the queen is bound to a higher marriage that cannot be severed. Her purpose is the preservation of the divine monogamy. She belongs to the cosmos. This reveals that the Great One's purpose is genetic isolation. They do not want their vessels to breed with lesser humans. They want a pure path for their energy. This makes the queen the sanitized matriarch. Her purpose is to keep the blood pure until the next red moon can claim the result. The fall of the vile bloods, who claim descent from her, was the Great One's way of pruning the branch that went stray. Furthermore, the baby's cry that stuns the hunter during the fight reveals the symbiotic shielding of her purpose. Murgo, the formless infant, is protecting the mother even from the grave or the nightmare. The lore suggests that the queen and the child are phase-locked. Her purpose is to be the psychic anchor for the child. As long as the queen exerts her will in the labyrinth, the child remains tethered to the world of men. This reveals the holding pattern purpose. The Great Ones use the queen to store the potential of the god in a state of arrested development. The rise of the hunter's mercy, killing the queen, is the only way to release the child from this limbo. The lore of the Yharnam stone, the item dropped upon her defeat, provides a mineral definition of her purpose. The stone is a petrified embryo. This reveals that the queen's purpose was to fossilize the truth. She is the living relic. By defeating her, the hunter is breaking the shell of history. This makes the protagonist the archaeologist of the soul. The queen's purpose was to wait until someone was strong enough to inherit the stone. The rise of the hunter into the final layer of Part 17 is only possible because they have absorbed the legacy of the first mother. The act concludes with the queen fading into mist, leaving only the stone behind. The crying stops. The lore of Part 16 establishes the Themerian queen as the tragic anchor of the human eldritch contract. She was the first witness to the Great One's purpose, and she paid for it with her womb and her will. The hunter realizes that the red moon is not an event, but a rendezvous. The Great Ones are coming back for their property. The rise of the hunter is the final claim on that property. The legacy of the queen's purpose in this chapter is the horror of the maternity. We realize that blessing is synonymous with invasion. The queen was not honored, she was occupied. Her purpose was to remind the hunter that the Great One's love is a heaviness that crushes the spine. As the hunter picks up the Yharnam stone, they understand that the purpose of the god is to use the queen to make a king. The fall of the queen is the crowning of the newborn. The final chapter in our 17-part chronicle of the Great One's purpose reaches the ultimate conclusion of the hunt. This is the lore of the Child of the Moon, the ascended protagonist who has surpassed the limits of human biology and the manipulation of the stars. While all other Great Ones we have studied, from the formless Eden to the protective wet nurse, represent established roles in the cosmic hierarchy, the hunter god represents the lore of the evolutionary breakthrough. This is the child of the third chord, the being whose purpose is to replace the aging management of the moon presence and initiate a new age of the dream. The lore of the hunter god is the lore of the successful surrogate. For the first time in the history of Yharnam, a human has not just witnessed the Great One's purpose, but has inherited it. The lore of the childhood's beginning reveals that the Great One's ultimate purpose was not the destruction of humanity, but the refining of the soul. The entire night of the hunt was a casting mold. The blood, the beasts, the insight, and the umbilical cords were ingredients used to pressure cook a human spirit into a divine template. This is the purpose of the crucible. The moon presence did not want a slave in Gehrman forever. She wanted a successor who could survive the gaze of the pale blood moon. By consuming the 3/3 chords, the hunter achieves internal equilibrium. Their purpose is to be the god of the third way, a being that possesses the empathy of the human and the power of the Great One. The rise of the infant Great One is the fall of the cycle of failure. The relationship between the hunter god and the doll provides the most sentimental insight into the new purpose. As the doll picks up the slug-like infant and whispers, "Oh, good hunter," she is fulfilling her role as the divine midwife. The lore of the nurtured divinity suggests that the purpose of the new god is benevolent reconstruction. Unlike the moon presence, who used the dream as a prison for hunters, the new Great One may use the dream as a nursery for the world. This reveals a redemptive purpose. The blood-slicked streets of Yharnam were the labor pains of this birth. The hunter god's purpose is to heal the fracture between the physical and the ethereal. They are the first naturalized Great One, a being who remembers what it is to bleed and fear. The physical form of the hunter god, a small, glowing, squid-like creature, tells a story of the return to the primordial. The lore of the luminous slug explains that at the highest level of existence, complexity returns to simplicity. The purpose of the new god is to reset the clock. The old gods had become stagnant, rotten, and bitter, like the brain of Menses or the orphan. The new god is fresh. This is the cyclical purpose of renewal. The cosmos cleans itself by producing a new heir who can purge the static of the previous era. This makes the protagonist the universal janitor. They have swept away the great ones who failed their purpose, and now they stand as the clean slate upon which the next universe will be written. Furthermore, the lore of the Great Sea and the cosmos being one reaches its resolution here. The hunter god is amphibious, belonging to the water of the lake and the stars of the sky. Their purpose is the harmonization of the planes. They are the bridge that doesn't break. Unlike Ebrietas, who was left behind, the hunter god goes beyond. This reveals that the Great One's purpose for humanity was transcendence through struggle. They wanted a species that would fight back against the inevitability of the void. The hunt was the final exam, and the hunter god is the only student who passed. The rise of the new moon is the end of the nightmare and the beginning of the dream. The blood echoes that the hunter collected throughout the journey now serve as the genetic memory of the new god. The lore suggests that the hunter god carries the weight of everyone they killed: Gascoigne, Maria, Ludwig, and the Shadows. Their purpose is to be the living archive of Yharnam. They are the god of the remembered. This reveals a commemorative purpose. The fall of the city was not in vain. It was documented in the cells of the ascended hunter. This makes the protagonist the tombstone of the civilization. The purpose of the new Great One is to ensure that the tragedy of the blood is never repeated. The act concludes with the sunrise in the waking world, while the dream continues under the new management. The lore of Part 17 establishes the hunter god as the sovereign of the new era. They have finished the work of Lawrence, Willem, and Gehrman, but they have transformed the result. Their purpose is to be the silence after the storm. The hunter realizes that the Great Ones were never the enemy. They were the ancestors waiting for a child who could walk on their own. The rise of the infant is the final grace of the Bloodborne story. The legacy of the hunter god's purpose in this final chapter is the horror of the responsibility. We realize that becoming a god is not a reward, but a service. The hunter is now the warden of the reality. Their purpose is to remind the next species that the stars are watching, but they are watching with the eyes of a human. As the doll cradles the new master, the screen fades to black, and the great cycle is complete. The fall of the man was the rise of the god of the hunt.